Hey guys, and welcome to another Factorio Workshop video. As always, I am joined by Mad Zuri.
Greetings.
And today we are going over several blue science builds. We actually have 5 of them here, and I've labeled them on the map similar to how we did the nuclear ones. So we'll start with this top one, which is submitted by the One Wolf 34. He submitted several things last season, if you remember. We'll just start here, and I'll kind of explain generally the layout, and then Zuri's going to provide pros and cons for each build, essentially. So these are all belt fed, by the way, and this guy is pretty good. This is actually exact perfect ratios, and I was looking at this and I was worried that things wouldn't get the amounts they need because these belts look really bare, but the reason for that is that they are literally perfect ratios. And after watching this, and as you can tell with the bottleneck, this thing grabs and gets materials exactly when it needs them because it's the perfect ratios, and it doesn't stop. It does not have a bottleneck. So this one does work fully. It's all ratioed out for one blue pack a second base rate, and then all these other things are ratioed essentially for one base rate as well to match that. And yeah, so your thoughts on this one, Zuri, pros, cons?
Well, I do like that most or almost everything is built in-house except for steel.
Mm-hmm.
The balance thing is very nice. I'm not so sure about this little balancer here, though. I'm not quite sure what it's doing here or why.
Oh, yeah, because they're already evenly balanced from the export.
Yeah, it's being fed to one side of the belt anyway, so this seems superfluous.
Yeah, this seems pretty unnecessary, but kind of a minor thing, I'd say. But yeah, I would change that. Just get rid of it. It's really not needed, I don't think.
Yes, and other than that, this is a pretty good build. You might have to upgrade some of these to stack inserters if you're going to upgrade this to higher tier machines and upgrade the belts and such for
Mm-hmm.
the copper output.
Yeah, very good point. So we'll move down to this build submitted by Lifeless, and this guy's interesting. It uses all direct insertion, which I find pretty intriguing. None of these other builds actually use direct insertion for all steps of the process. Now, it doesn't direct insert miners, but the engines and red circuits it does. And ratio-wise, it's correct. However, you will notice that some of these things aren't quite working. And yeah, I'll start down here, I guess, with the miners. The miners are not getting enough iron because this needs to be a shared iron circuit belt, since we didn't see any other input place for the circuits for the miners. And then these guys are lacking miners, obviously, since the miners aren't working. And then everything else is backed up. So, thoughts on this, Suri? Probably fairly similar.
Well, yeah, the direct insertion is a thing of beauty. I actually really like designs that do this sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a lot more difficult than you'd think to feed enough iron to the miner builds. It eats a lot of iron, so this needs an extra belt of iron and change some inserters and such. And otherwise, this is a really good build.
Yeah, definitely. So if you can get these fed with iron, this is a really cool build. When I first placed it down, I really liked the fact that almost all of it was direct insertion. Um, and then, yeah, again, I believe all of these are ratioed one way or the other for 1 a second, which is nice because they're fairly easy to compare then. But we'll move down to this next one, submitted by coolbobto. And this guy is very compact, again, ratioed to 1 a second base rate for all the things. It does have slightly the same problem as the above build, not quite as bad though, in terms of feeding these miners. You can see once in a while these do stop due to a lack of iron. And we even made these stack inserters. The build came with fast inserters, and it was nowhere near close enough to working. So we did make these 2 stack inserters, but at that point, I think it's the belt actually not being able to keep up.
Yeah, this looks like it was designed for tier 2 machines and then upgraded to tier 3 for submission or later in the base.
Mm-hmm.
And as with most things, yeah, it's hard to feed these enough iron to keep them going all the time. And I'm guessing the base it came from was short on iron a lot.
Yeah, these miners eat iron like crazy. But that's a really good point I hadn't thought of that you mentioned, Zuri, is that if this entire thing was blue machines, level 2 machines, it would actually probably work perfectly. Because, you know, they are zero point 0.7 speed rather than the 1.25 speed of these level 3 machines. So that would be one way to get it working. And probably when you first build Blue Science, you would only have level 2 machines anyways. So based on that, this would actually work quite well, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it's also very nicely compact, which is pleasing.
Yeah, I really like that. And speaking of compact, this one I would say is almost even more compact, just more vertically, large than horizontally. And this one is submitted by um, Deathotic, and he is pretty much perfectly ratioed as well. We had a little bit of trouble figuring out which belts went where and had to adjust some stuff because you do need this to be like a shared circuit and gear belt for these to actually get gears, and then it's to be a full iron belt around back for it to get enough iron. But once we did get that worked out, it seems to work pretty much perfectly. None of these Blue Science machines seem to ever really be lacking resources. So I quite like this one. And your thoughts, Zuri?
Yeah, I like the stitched underground belts and the double long inserters. A neat trick I've been using for like 2 or 3 years. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was fun trying to figure out what belts go where.
Yeah,
And
that
if
was
you upgrade this to tier 3 machines, you might have to upgrade some of these other machines to tier 2, since there are tier 1 machines in here.
that's a good point. Yeah, which I didn't notice initially that he does utilize tier 1 machines within this build. And one last thing I want to point out with this, a little trick that will be annoying for some. I know it kind of annoys Zuri because it leaves you with an odd underground, but this is a neat trick he uses where this copper comes in, which is only used for these cables, and he's actually just used the front half of an underground belt to essentially stop it from merging onto this cable belt, which is a neat trick. Again, it leaves you with an odd underground, which can be quite frustrating, but just cool thing to point out that you may not think of.
Yeah, it prevents belt contamination for really tight belt builds like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing this build has that I don't like is this uncapped buffer box.
Oh, yes. I would agree with that.
Because yeah, Blue Science is kind of expensive, and you probably don't want to just store up a ton of it.
Yeah, it's maybe a bit excessive. The box I would either get rid of or just cap it, maybe like the first row. Even then, that's quite a bit. But yeah, so overall, good build here. And then we move on to this one, which is quite interesting. This was submitted by Wadzu93, and this is the first one we have that uses modules in the machines, which I'm a little bit on the edge with in terms of the efficiency modules. I mean, I guess if you're having power issues, then definitely go for it. But yeah, so he feeds these through, and the one difference between this build and all the others is that this one is actually completely tileable left to right. And obviously at a point, the belts would no longer be able to support, the resources you need. But if I grab this really quick, just pretend that this power source is not here because it's going to be in the way. But you would line it up like this, and it does tile very nicely to the left, or you can even do it from the front, and it tiles quite nicely that way as well. But yeah, pretty good. Everything seems to run okay. And what are your thoughts here, Zuri? You were mentioning something to me earlier about the use of modules and such.
Yeah, well, pros definitely that it tiles. That's pretty good. And actually, the engines seem to be operating at 100%, and it seems to be mathed out that since the engines take 10 seconds to craft and Blue Science takes 12, that this one productivity module in here perfectly speeds up, or sorry, slows down the machine even with the bonus to match speeds with the Blue Science.
Mm-hmm.
So you're still losing crafting speed and you're losing efficiency even with an efficiency module in there, but doing so makes it a straight 1-to-1 ratio.
Yeah, which is a really, really clever trick to use these modules to actually slow down the machines. Now, I imagine, I mean, personally, if I had built this, I would have just, left off two engine assemblers. For symmetry, maybe that's why he did it. I don't know. So that they are symmetrical in terms of 12 top, 12 bottom. But you could just only do 10 machines without modules, and you would still have a perfect ratio.
Or with the efficiency modules, because people
yeah.
underestimate how useful efficiency modules are just on their own. And this random inserter, which we thought was an extra pipe, but it didn't need it.
Yeah, this, I'm not sure, something's missing. The blueprint is exactly like this is, so I don't know if it got borked or he just forgot to take it out, because it looks like this inserter is meant for something. But again, there was nothing here, and it doesn't seem to be lacking pipe. So I'm not really sure what this was meant for. But even so, it does run perfectly. You can see all the green bottleneck lights. Maybe, never mind. I was gonna say something about tileability and adding extra assemblers, but that would make no sense. So, yeah, overall, this is quite good. The module use is very clever, and like Zuri said, the fact it tiles, I think, is a huge pro here. Again, obviously, you would hit belt limits at some point, but just the fact you can easily stamp this on the end or even on the beginning makes this a really, really good build to just keep expanding until you run out of belt throughput.
And you might be able to squeeze out an extra build if you upgrade some of these to blue belts.
Yeah, definitely. And I believe that's it. That's all of our builds. Any other thoughts or anything you want to cover here, Zuri, before we close out?
No, these are all really clever builds. And for the most part, I approve.
Yeah, a few little things, as we mentioned throughout the video, that probably could be changed or need to be tweaked in order for them to work fully. But as a build itself goes, all these are really well done, really interesting, and very clever. And I believe that will do it for this one, guys. So, as always, links in the description for the blueprint strings for these builds, and leave your thoughts and comments down in the comments. That would be awesome. If you enjoyed, feel free to leave a like, and until next time, we will see you later.
Later.